Putting up a bunch of posters and thinking that this is going to somehow transform kids into being calm is way off base. Let's take these posters down and actually create a real calm corner. In my years working as a pediatric occupational therapist, I've had experience with building sensory rooms, with using Schnoozelen principles, as well as sensory integration. Today, I want to walk you through step by step how to create a calm corner, whether it is for your own home, your school, or your early education center. But before we even get into the calm corner, I want to tell you a story of one of my treatment sessions. So I worked for a number of years in hydrotherapy, and a couple of times a year we would have a day that was a day with like the lights off in the pool. So I think you can probably imagine this if you've ever been to like an evening pool party where it's dark outside, but there's the lights from under the water that like kind of trickle through, and they make this really special space that feels very calming and very relaxing. And we built the whole environment during that time really around this principle of rest and relaxation. We had a lot of deep pressure movements that we would do with the kids underneath the water to calm their bodies. We had a lot of singing and soft kind of songs that we would do in different corners so it wasn't too crowded or too busy like it normally is. And this experience of just these children that I'd worked with in so many different contexts at preschool, also in the pool, also with their families. So I really knew these children really well. And then seeing how they reacted to this really, really restful space and this kind of pocket of time where they were invited into rest really transformed my ideas around self-regulation in the early years. Kids need to experience rest. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty and the step-by-step of this calm corner, I want to bust one huge myth that I see repeated over and over and over again on social media when it comes to calm corners, and that is that calm corners are an alternative for positive parenting timeouts. Okay, that was a big sentence. You may have noticed this shift in recent generations of parenting away from timeouts, which were traditionally used during times of heightened emotions, towards something called time-ins. So what does that really mean? What are time-ins and why would they be in place of timeouts? And what does that all mean? So basically, when we look at what a tantrum is, when a child, especially a young child, this is different when it comes to, our children that are already well into grade school and our teenagers, but for young children that their brains are very much still developing, they can almost get flooded by their emotions. You may have heard of amygdala hijacking, you may have heard of the upstairs and the downstairs brain, but basically what happens is that when they experience some kind of frustration or the things in life that would cause them big emotions, which aren't necessarily things we have to take away, but they have a big reaction to it, it's almost like their brain functions in its more primitive centers, and our children experience something that is quite similar to fight, flight, or freeze because they are overwhelmed with what they're experiencing. So whatever the trigger was for this big emotion is almost irrelevant at this point when our young children are in a tantrum, because they're really just flooded by what they're feeling. And what science is kind of pointing more towards is that in these times, what our children need most is not necessarily a rule being put in place. And that's not to say that rules aren't important, they are. But in that time when they're being flooded, they need experiences of safety, that their body is really looking for safety. And that's why the concept of time in started, that when a child is having a big emotion, especially a young child, we don't want to send them somewhere away. We want to bring them in and be present for them, use our co-regulation skills to try and bring them back down. Now, I just want to put a little caveat here that I think that this is an age-dependent strategy. I think that timeouts have their place and time, not with little kids though. When we're looking at our young kids, I think that time-ins are incredibly powerful. But what I see happening over and over again is that the idea of a calm corner somehow got melted with the idea of a time-in. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm experiencing big emotions, I don't actually want to start going over flashcards of coping strategies. I want to have my cry. I want to have my moment of frustration and then start processing it and then start learning how to, deal with it. But when we put this idea of calm corners being these little corners that are like plastered with coping strategies, and we put a 3-year-old in that space and say, this is good and positive, and this is your calming space, and these are all the rules that you should follow, while they're in a big emotion, it kind of, I don't know, for me, it seems like really off base. Now, I'm not at all saying that emotional literacy doesn't have its place. It definitely does. But when we look at this thing of calm, we have to remember that it is a whole body experience. If I asked you, what does it feel like to fly? You would probably remember some kind of experience that you'd had that felt like flying, maybe a roller coaster, or maybe you were jumping really high or bouncing on a bouncing castle. But you can really picture and remember that feeling, that like stomach in your throat feeling, that floaty feeling of something like flying. You remember that experience much more than you would remember what I described to you as the feeling of flying, or some dictionary definition of what it means to fly. And the same is true for calmness. We want our children to actually have that body memory of what it feels like to be calm. This is why so much research and science and so many new tools that are being developed are gearing us towards practices like mindfulness, meditation, and again, why we really do try to embrace this practice of safety within relationships. In order for our children to get to the point of being self-regulated, and of course that's also a very big developmental piece. It's not just a learned experience. It's also something that they need to grow into, that their body actually needs to develop into. If we want our children to get to that place of emotional regulation, which we hope that we have, when we're driving in traffic and having our toddlers having tantrums, that we can actually regulate our own emotions. We want our children to get there as well. But first, we have to build in them the opposite experience, like that they know what they're needing to return to. They know what is the point that they're trying to reach through these big experiences, and that is calm, and that is rest. Their body can say to them, that's what calm feels like, that's where I'm going. Now, of course, there are many ways that we can start to build this into our children's lives and also our own lives. Some of these ways include these safe spaces in relationship, having mindful moments, having play. Play is a huge, huge factor in children building self-regulation and also building those cognitive skills for self-regulation. But a calm corner is another strategy that we as educators, parents, and therapists can add to our toolbox in terms of supporting our children in finding that calm. So let's talk about the nitty-gritty of how we can actually start setting this up. We're basically looking to create a space that is like a corner or a place in your home that says to your child, be calm here, come, unwind. A space that they feel like, whether it is in the end stages of a tantrum or whether it is at the end of a long day of school, that they have a spot that they feel that they can unwind in. Now, this is going to look very different in different age groups and different house structures. When we look at a calm corner, I would say that we're really looking at this for about 2 years and up, more towards 3 years and up, because really before that, the parent's body is the calm space. That's like really where our children want to be, less than a different kind of space for most children. Some children might vary with that, but I would say we only really start thinking about this kind of zone in our home when our children are about 2 and up. And basically what we are wanting, so the when of when we do this, we have this calm corner, is according to your routine. Now, I don't think that this is a place that we should send children during tantrums. Like, you go and be in that space and I'm going to come with you and that's how you're going to calm down. I actually think that often the calm corner is a place at the very tail end of the tantrum or the meltdown. And I think that it's not necessarily the place, also if children are older, that you're saying when they're like angry or whatever, like go to this place. I think that we're wanting to kind of build this into our routine so that our children know when they need to go there. So I wouldn't say that it's something that you need to be practicing, like having time in the calm corner every single day. It might be something that you want to kind of watch how your child goes to the space and then kind of build around that some kind of a routine. So for some families that really might be after school, we eat and then we go to the calm corner and we have some like downtime. For other families, this might be just something that is available for when your children need it. One of the most important components of the when, and this comes down to the school as well. I don't know that it's necessarily something that we need to always have it just in the schedule, but more like it's an option, a free option for when children are allowed to go there and able to go there and want to go there. Now, the other big component of the when is having time available that this would be open, right? So if this is in a school setting or an educational setting, if you're doing like table time in the morning where children are rotating between different games and play, this might be like one of the tables or one of the spaces that is open during that time. You may not want it to be open during certain lessons times or eating time or things that are a bit more structured, but it might not also be like a designated time in the schedule, maybe in the beginning, just to get kids used to it. The same at home. It needs to be that there's enough time at home for a child to be actually able to use this. So especially with our younger children, and often this is the time when we're thinking of calm corners because there are all those big emotions, we actually don't have enough time in our schedules that our children aren't being like pushed from let's do baking, let's do this, let's do that, let's do that. So as we build up our independent playtime, and I'll link up a video above here that I did all about independent play. As we build up the independent playtime, then we want to make sure that there's like cushioning in that time that if they want to use the calm corner, they can. So let's talk about the second component of where should we do this. This is really, really dependent on your place of work or your home. For a long time, our family had this in our children's beds. They both have kind of canopies over their beds, and that was the space that they could find to really have their calm down time. Now they're both in separate rooms, so they actually have their own space within their rooms that they can use as their calm down corner or their space for calming down. Some people like to have this in their living room, in like a corner of their living room, and the same can go for a classroom. This might be in one of like the nooks and crannies in the back kind of corner of a classroom, but it might also be just like at your reading corner, or it might be a specialized corner in the main body of the rooms as well. Now we've got a spot. We know how and when we're going to try and like implement this. Let's talk about the what goes in it. So as I said, I don't think that this needs to be a space where you're plastering the walls with coping strategies. A good idea might be, if you're finding that this is something that's helpful for your child specifically, or the children that you're working with, to have some kind of a box or a little basket with some of those coping strategies in it. But in terms of the visual space, we want the visual space to say, come unwind. So for older children, that might be having some books in there. It might be having like a nice bottle of cold water or something like that. For younger children, we might be wanting to put an audio book box, like the Yoto player or the Tony box in there. We could also, again, have books that they can flip through, or some of those flap books, things that they can do a little bit more independently, because we are wanting this to be more of their time. You might be with your child, but we want it to be more their time. There are a lot of also sensory toys that can be really calming. So I'll link a couple of them down below, but like those rainmakers that the beads drop down, slime, fidget toys, those might be some things that for each independent child that might work for them. We also can use weighted blankets, weighted toys, lap blankets to bring in that component of deep pressure, that sensory component, as well as different like lycra or stretch material things like those Casper suits, and there's various materials. I'll link some of my favorite down below. But we're putting things into that space that your child specifically likes to use to calm down. We've also, for our children, had at times different like mouthing toys or chewables, like those necklaces that you can chew on, just to give them also that stimulation, which is very calming. Calm corners are an incredible resource for our children, and they really can help us to battle the big war that we are waging in this generation of kids on overstimulation. If you want to know more about that, I have a video on your screen now, which is going to walk you through what overstimulation actually means, and could this be the root cause for all of those big emotions that you're seeing. I will see you over there.